This week on the Markcast, more USFL news. It looks like it's almost a go. And finally, we heard something from Redbird and Dany.
Yeah, we're hacking into the Sportico, live streams. We're pulling clips for you. You can hear Dany talk about why they have been less transparent with the fans maybe than they would like. Gerry Cardinale is talking about the global vision for the XFL. That's exciting. And then, I think it's all systems go. We are kicking off in April in Birmingham for the USFL 2.0.
We've got Natey Adjei coming up.
McCallum Thompson, he's finally the face of the franchise here in Toronto. There's finally a team that said, okay, he's our guy. And I have to say he's earned it. The guys in the locker room love him. The fans obviously love him.
Color commentator of Paul's Toronto Argos. Natey is coming on. Natey had like an earthquake during his interview. Like part of his picture fell. It's be ready for it in the interview. It's very exciting. Longtime friend of the show, Rob Vanstone and Candy come back. Candy makes an appearance. She's in a cone, but Rob's back.
You wait all this time, you wait 2 years for football to resume, and then it's just not very good. And I'm not a CFL hater. I think I'm the antithesis of that. I've been watching this league for 50 years.
And then Paul McCallum, I asked him about his thoughts of my campaign for America's CFL team.
Not America's CFL team.
And you have to see what he has to say. In the time since you've been on the podcast last, we have now adopted the BC Lions, one of your former teams, as our official team. I have coined them America's CFL team. Do you support me in that campaign?
Yeah, I think so. I really do.
Also, the big cameo surprise. Reed got a cameo. It's going to be great to see who that's from. That's going to be interesting.
Longtime listeners of the show know our dabbles in Cameo, and this one I feel like lives up to the hype. Is it a frenemy of the show? Well, you'll find out.
And of course, we're asking: does the CFL have an entertainment problem? I mean, when Toronto keeps trading away quarterbacks, maybe they don't. Just tune in. Welcome to the Markcast. Do you ever watch that jersey?
I do. I've tried to be careful with how often, because I just I take it off and I put it back in the closet. I have a whole closet behind here of my He Hate Me jersey. I have my PJ Walker jersey, both the authentic and the replica from the Roughnecks. So yeah, I try to keep them clean.
Cool. I was going to say this the other day. You look like Tigger.
Yeah.
Friend. This tall orange and black thing. That's what's going on. It's Halloween every day for you.
Well, when you're interviewing, CFL BC Lions legend Paul McCallum, I mean, you gotta wear the BC Lions merch. He appreciated it. He appreciated the merch. So
fair point. He's coming up at the end of the show. Before him, though, Natey Adjei and Rob Vanstone, friend of the show, coming back to talk to Reed.
We have a really big show today. So we have.
You say that every week, though. You do.
But yeah, so we actually have real USFL news today. Real news, confirmed, Birmingham. We're going for Birmingham. We have all the info. We have XFL stuff. I pulled a couple sound clips from Dany and Gerry Cardinale. We have my special cameo for us, for you, for the podcast. And then we even have the USFL hat unboxing, the official hat unboxing, even though Stefan that runs XFL Newsroom is the only other person in the world that owns one of these hats, and he unboxed his on Twitter already. I saved mine for the podcast. So we're the only two people in the world. You couldn't have waited for me, Stefan. You had to open yours first. So anyway, we have a very big show.
You'll need to coordinate. Synchronize your swatches or something.
Yeah. Please subscribe. So, we crossed the 1,500. We're getting up there, 1,523. Matt Baker, BC Lions, is going to give us some merch for the giveaway for 2,000. He was going to give it to us. And remember, we didn't get to BC, so we didn't get the merch. But yeah, so please like and subscribe. I'm mailing out all this stuff right now. Paul, we're going to give Steve his Argos jersey in Hamilton. He's going to be there. So that saves us about $1 million shipping to Canada for one thing. And then Kyle and Shane are getting the other stuff. We've talked with all them. And so I'm going to ship all that stuff out this week. You saw we had another good review come in this week.
Cool. Alt Football Forever. That is from Evan F91. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, he says, great host, great guest, perfect listen for all football fans. So, the markcast.com/review. We don't plug the reviews a lot in the subscribe stuff, but please, we're still trying to build this stuff up. I really appreciate it. And the reviews don't cost you anything, and it makes us feel good. So
I could say something very spicy right now, but I think I'll withhold. So Well, we're not the premier place to get your CFL news. So moving on.
I stand by the fact that we are the premier American CFL podcast.
And that's fair.
I stand by that.
I know that's what you said.
You
didn't say overall. You just said that. You want to say United States of America? Would that be the West Coast? Would that be acceptable?
We're the premier Seattle and LA based CFL podcast.
There you go.
Paul, so here, spoiler, I had to buy this late at night. We have our Grey Cup tickets. I texted you, and I know you're working or whatever. They're going on. Because, see, I thought they were going to sell out right away. Now, they still haven't sold out. But they are a lot more expensive now than they were. So I saved us like 150, loonies a ticket because they're, it's cheaper. But, so I
got to find a button, a sound clip for you and play it every time you say something like loonies or... If you call your beanies toques, we're gonna have an issue. We're gonna have a serious issue.
But anyway, so we have our Grey Cup tickets. We're all official now. So we're gonna get our tests like we didn't do before, but we have our flights, we have our Airbnb, we have our Grey Cup tickets booked. So we're in like Flint. We have we're like row 13. They're not like the best tickets in the world, but they're not the worst. But we will be in the building. Still working on media passes so that I can give Arash a hug in the media press booth. That is my goal.
That is your goal?
I would like to give Arash. I would like to go up to Arash and like give him like a big wet kiss on like the side of the ear or something, just to just to rattle the cages a little bit. No,
I see where you're going with that. Get inside his head a little bit. Yeah. We have an Arash shirt kind of. Anyway, so we got the big cameo surprise. So you decide when we can do that. We can do that going into break. We can do that midway through the show. Let's do it at the end of the show. Let's just do it at the end of the show.
Well, okay, then people, you got to wait around for this because this is really, I'm telling you guys, if you are a fan of the show, this is really worth it. Then the hat thing, XFL news coming up. I've pulled the sound bites. We're going to do that. And then I have a picture here. I'm going to post it. Friend of the show, Nathan Woodside, was at the Battlehawk Stadium for like a band thing. He was there, and they still, because no team plays there right now, right? Because St. Louis, doesn't have a football team, whatever. So it still has the Battlehawks like logos on the field like 2 years later. And so he said, holy crap, guys, the Battlehawks logos are still on the field. And I said, still, or are they there again? Just we're thinking. Anyway, the title of the show is, does the CFL have an entertainment problem? We're going to talk about that. We talk about the guests and stuff, but very poor weekend of games last week, and then hopefully we will improve it this week. You see our BC Lions score there, Paul.
It's not ours. It's not ours. Alouettes beat the Argonauts, my team, not your team, my team, 37-16. Blue Bombers. That's hard to say. It's really hard to say. They stomped Reed's Lions, 45-zip. Hamilton, 32-3 over the Red Blacks because they're just terrible. And the Rough Riders beat the Stamps, 20-17.
My heart is racing getting ready to post this cameo. I am racing. I don't know if I can wait. We might have to do it into the first break.
Okay.
We'll see. A big weekend here. Lions are going to Argos. We preview that with Natey. Tiger Cats, Elks. Some of these aren't the most exciting. I think Stamps are going to roll. Alouettes, obviously, going over Argos last week. They're making a run, to be the first in the East. And then, you have the Argos just trading away Arbuckle, which we'll talk about here, with McLeod, seeing how they're going to do against BC. And then, obviously, the Elks trying to figure out the whole quarterback situation there. And then, with the Alouettes. So, some intrigue this weekend, but there's been a lot of like LeMays online lately, kind of about the quality of the play is finally catching up to people.
Got it. Cool. With that being said, let's move on. You just mentioned it before. Nick Arbuckle traded to the Elks from the Toronto Argonauts.
Big news, typically, and I talk with this with Natey, typically you don't lose 37-16 and then trade away one of your quarterbacks the next week and go like, hey, we're sticking with McLeod. Obviously, we're happy for McLeod. We called him the king of the CFL. You'll remember back in week 2. But surprising there, it's good. They're finally, he has continually fought for a backup position, for years. He's always in competition. He's been signed and cut, all these teams. It's good to finally have McLeod. Dinwiddie says he is the face of our franchise. It is good to see. I'm not going to make like a what is the Argos franchise right now joke, but it is good to see that like McLeod is finally getting the shot.
You're getting ahead of yourself here on the Google Doc. That's like the third story, and you're just like talking it up right now. Sorry. But in between then and there, we could talk about Chad Kelly, nephew of Jim Kelly, Toronto Argonauts acquiring his negotiation list rights in the trade for Nick Arbuckle.
Yeah, I mean, people are really hoping that Arbuckle gets a fresh start again in Edmonton. This is his fourth team in 3 or 4 years. His wife's given birth. It's really this human element to it, right? Where this isn't like fantasy draft. We're moving people. I mean, he's got to move all the way over. He got to move to Edmonton now. We're in the middle of the season. Presumably a lot of his family is probably not, local, right? Helping him do all these things. So I just couldn't imagine that, especially with everything going on. But yeah, Chad Kelly, nephew, Jim Kelly, he's a legend. But McLeod is their guy right now, which is surprising to me. He's been a little inconsistent lately, but they feel like, and Natey, we'll talk in his interview, he feels like he's really earned that through 13 weeks this season. So
to that point, head coach Ryan Dinwiddie said he thinks that McLeod feels the respect that we view him as a starter and the face of our franchise. Of course, this year he has over 1,600 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. You don't really want a 2-to-1, 1.3 to 1. Yeah, it's a 1.3 to 1 interception to touchdown ratio. That's scary. But maybe this confidence boosting statement that Dinwiddie said will help calm McLeod Bethel Thompson down.
It's just cool. We tracked him back in the spring league back, November of last year. So it's just cool to see like that trajectory. He was in the spring league from the year off with the CFL, goes back to the CFL, earns his spot. It's just cool that we have tracked, obviously not all of his career, but the last year and a half now that we've really been tracking him along the way. And to see him now, with your team, the Argos, it's cool. So
very cool stuff. Moving across further into the border there, the Ottawa REDBLACKS have fired general manager Marcel Desjardins. He was the first employee hired by the REDBLACKS in 2013, said Mark Goody, president CET. Goody?
Mark Goody. And it's Desjardins. I think it's Desjardins.
Desjardins.
Yes.
Desjardins.
He was their only GM once they rebranded the REDBLACKS. They were the Rough Riders before and all that stuff. This has been a long time coming. Obviously, Ottawa sitting like at 2-9. Something needed to be changed, right? Paul LaPolice expected to stay as the head coach. That's brought in a lot of issues, right? Like you're going to keep the head coach and then bring in the new GM that maybe wouldn't have all the say that they could have said, right? You would presumably hope that maybe they could bring in, a new head coach, but this has been a long time coming. I think REDBLACKS fans are pretty happy with this and a lot of the changes that have been made, letting go a lot of star players that now have succeeded in other teams and basically just not setting them up well for the future.
Potential candidate for that job. Well, maybe not. Maybe he's just throwing his name out there kind of sort of in a roundabout way. TSN analyst Dwayne Ford said he'd be lying if he said that he wasn't interested in that job. The thing that he would say is that the opportunity to help build a team is something that has always interested me. For anyone with those kinds of aspirations, I think there are a lot of very positive, very attractive things about the Ottawa situation. Ford explained on TSN 1200 radio in Ottawa.
Yeah, once it came out, once Marcel was out, that was kind of one of the first things, one of those crowd, like, hey, if we say this enough online, maybe you get some steam. There's a list of candidates. I mean, obviously, they're interim people right now, just kind of getting through the season. And then, REDBLACKS are going to be needing a total rebuild here coming out. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, what they do with, like, the quarterback situation, too. They've had a bunch of different, turnover and injuries and stuff there as well. So.
Moving forward, the BC Lions, Reed's team, they're getting star receiver Lucky Whitehead back in the lineup this week against my Argos. Of course, he suffered a broken hand against the Blue Bombers on October 1st and underwent surgery. And so now he's going to be in the game.
Yeah, that's a quick turnaround. I mean, they really need him. I think that's ahead of the timeline that they had. I believe it was 4 to 6 weeks when he was injured. It's a little more like 3 to 4 now. We showed, obviously, remember we had the X-ray and we showed all that on the podcast. So yeah, good to have Lucky back. I don't think that's enough for BC to take on Toronto, but it's not going to hurt.
We'll see. Bad news in an injury related way. Seattle Seahawks legend and Saskatchewan Roughriders punter John Ryan suffered an ankle injury in week 12. Apparently, he's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, he's one of the elder statesmen in the CFL, still killing it. And, swelled up pretty bad. They said, Coach Dickinson said, but not too good. The other thing, I thought this was interesting. Matt Baker did kind of like an AMA with Amar Doma, and they were doing if you were a season ticket holder, you were doing a roundtable. Apparently, Mr. Damon is putting in for Vancouver to host the 2024 Grey Cup. I said, pre-funk at my place. We'll drive up, we'll like caravan up to the border. We'll have all our paperwork in order. And then they think some jersey tweaks are going on. But I've seen a lot online, I think the Lions a lot try to hey, we switched our jersey. Let's get some more people to the games. I think they do that a lot. It's kind of like the gimmick, like the Vince McMahon, let's bring back Brock Lesnar, let's switch the jersey. But the 2024 Grey Cup, because it's Saskatchewan, it's Hamilton, Saskatchewan, back to Hamilton, and then it would be 2024, which who even knows if the CFL is existing in 20, but that's the plan.
You're pissed off.
Yeah, that's the plan. So, yes. Yeah.
As of week 12, 8 of the 9 clubs have met the 85% fully vaccinated milestone. Based on upcoming scheduled vaccination dates, the league anticipates that 93% of current players will be fully vaccinated by Halloween.
It's Edmonton, right? I mean, they're the one, right? It's crazy now. 8 of 9. It's crazy. We're at this time, but you have a GM there. Brock Sutherland doesn't. He's not vaccinated, so it's challenging. Anyway, but 8 of 9 is good, right? Travel issues are not going to be an issue for Edmonton going into the playoffs. So I presume they just say F it at this point. We don't care.
Yep. Attendance this week: Toronto versus Montreal had 12,000 people. Ottawa versus Hamilton over 20,000. You had BC and Winnipeg having 23,750, and Saskatchewan versus Calgary 21,000.
Yeah, they're below the numbers, right? We're really open now. Winnipeg holds about 30,000, right? They had that for the home opener, and I'm seeing this a lot online. The bills are going to become due at the end of the season here, right? Because they really hoped, okay, once we get everything open, we're going to get a lot of fans in. Remember, we talked Toronto had 6,700 a couple weeks ago, so it's getting to that point where yes, we have people in, but only getting 23 in Winnipeg when they're basically crushing everybody. Right. I mean, you would think that Winnipeg's on a hot streak if they're not selling out right now, especially against BC, which isn't a nobody team. I mean, it ended up being a terrible game, but not good news there.
TV ratings had the Toronto-Montreal matchup at 410,000 on TSN. That beat out the Raps Celtics, the Oilers versus the Knights, but didn't beat out Boston and Houston, Game 6, the World Series.
Yeah, just kind of seeing where.
Sorry.
Yeah, just seeing kind of where the rankings are. I mean, they're still drawing on TV, right? I mean, BC Winnipeg, 600,000 on TV is I think a tremendous number. It's just getting fans. The fact that you can only get the 23 into the stadium, that is kind of the issue there. Especially when that's like a Saturday. It's not a weekday thing. It's not even a Friday.
Apparently, though, on that note, the CFL has an entertainment problem, and there's no easy solution. 3 Down Nation, Rob Vanstone, Daniel Austin, and Twitter erupting about this even Canadian high school.
Well, just even the Canadians, it's like a CFL issue. Canadian high schools that are coming off a year off, they're playing well. U Sports are playing well, right? Obviously the NFL, no preseason or limited. They're it is very much like a CFL problem. We've talked about this before. 30% of the players on the roster right now have never played a CFL game, until this year. But this is something where all walks of life. When Daniel Austin is talking about this and Rob Vanstone, everybody, I tweeted out the 3 Down article, very mixed. I got over 100 votes. You get, yes, there's no problem, or, no, there is a problem. And, Rob and I get into this a lot in the interview. I just kind of wanted to tease that and point that out.
Okay. Not a friend of the show. Foodie Fajardo, not the biggest fan of Montreal smoked meat sandwiches, or the Markcast for that matter.
Yeah, this is a good one. They were interviewing Cody about traveling, being a man of Canada, getting to travel around. And they were talking about him making this trip to Montreal, and he's not a big fan of the smoked meats. I just thought this is tremendous. This got a lot of play. This got a lot of airtime. I saw a lot of quotes about this, basically saying, I know guys are a fan of the smoked meat. I'm not the biggest fan. I have tried it before. I just thought that was tremendous.
Thanks, Cody.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks. Jeremiah Mosoli will start for us. Orlando Stenauer names Mosoli the starter against Edmonton in Week 13.
Surprising they got Dane Evans back. Dane was on the injured list for 6 weeks. Surprising they got Mazzoli, Evans back, and they're still going with Mazzoli. He has been inconsistent this season. Hamilton is still very much in contention, but he said, you might be seeing them both this week, but Mazzoli getting the start just does seem weird to me that you wouldn't really put the focus back on Evans now that you have him, because I don't think Mazzoli's been playing that strong.
Interesting. The Winnipeg Jets have moved the start time for their December game that's happening on the same day as the CFL West final in Winnipeg. They were, there's always that worry that, you have to pick one or the other. And thankfully, Seattle has a good system where you don't have to pick one or the other during baseball season. You can go to the game first, the soccer match, or the baseball game, vice versa. They schedule it out very well, and it looks like they've done that here in Winnipeg.
This was pandemonium. That's why I put it in here. People, I saw this, people freaking out online. We're not going to be able to attend both. They've pushed the one back. They've moved the other one forward. All is right in the world. You can go see both of these.
There you go. So. And then this tweet.
Yeah, this Todd, friend of the show, Todd. He's right here. You see this.
Yeah. He's saying, but seriously, let's blame the media for not promoting the Argos. If this isn't getting fans in to watch, that clearly means they're not interested in the product. Do you think it's a situation where they're not interested in the product? Or is it kind of like a middle finger to MLSE?
Yeah, it's hard, right? So I'll put the tweet up here, but they're $25 tickets. You get a soft drink or water and a hot dog with, it's like, what can we incentivize you? I saw the Elks I just saw tonight, I didn't put it in here, but they're selling all you can eat seats. So if you pay $99, you get unlimited Coke and nachos and stuff. I'm like, we're doing anything we can to get people in. But yeah, when you draw 6,700 people, you're really, but I don't know if it's a middle finger. It's just, I've heard it's just not cool to be at Argos games, right? And not to make fun or whatever, but it's challenging. I've had writers talk about this. Natey, in his interview, he called it, politely, he goes, well, it's not like Toronto has the strongest home field advantage. I go, wow. That's a really polite way to say we don't have a lot of, support, loud support here when you're in the stadium.
They could do things to change that. Bring Drake in. I don't know. That'll get people in the stands.
Well, but Drake wants to be with the Raptors, right? That's his big thing.
Well, he's already tied into MLSE. It all works out. Yeah. Make that happen. All right.
You ready for the cameo?
Yeah, let's play the cameo.
Okay, so I'm going to text this to you. We're going to talk. Now, it should not show you who it is in the when you get it, okay?
Okay.
And then I'm going to mute my mic because I don't want to. I want just the audio to come from you, and then I will put the video on when I do the video. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself now, and good luck with this. I really hope it works.
What's going on, Markcast? It's Cody Fajardo here, quarterback Saskatchewan Roughriders. And I just want to congratulate you on getting your Markcast off. Your buddy Reed is the one who booked this. He told me about you. You've been in a Markcast for over a year now, which I bet has been tremendously tough, especially because you can't attend any Roughrider games. And your buddy Reed also told me you're a huge CFL fan. You guys got your Grey Cup tickets already set to go. Hopefully the Roughriders will be in that game and we can cross paths during that amazing week. It's truly incredible. Markcast fans like you that make it's special to be the starting quarterback for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So thanks for sticking with us through the ups, through the downs, through the wins, through the losses. We're going to try and make a late push here so we can have a deep run in the playoffs and hopefully hoist that Grey Cup over our heads. So happy to hear you're getting the Markcast up. I'll continue to pray for you and send you some sprinkles of Jesus to continue Markcast. And like I said, I hope I can see you in the Grey Cup and maybe be able to sign a jersey or a card for you. Have an amazing time. Thanks for all your support. And thanks for being a huge CFL fan. God bless. Markcast, go Riders.
How long was that?
God bless Markcast. Go Riders.
Sprinkles of Jesus. Sprinkles of Jesus.
Now, here's the thing. So we're going to post this online after. I'm going to get everyone to share this. Jesus. Cody, we are a fan of you. Okay, we are a fan. Now, here's the backstory. So I submitted that, and it got rejected. It said, this is for business use. I'm not going to do it. And I thought, oh, he's on to us, right? Like Cody's on, he's figured out the ploy. Cause I put like Reed in there and like, whatever. But then I got an email from Cameo support and they go, hey, like this is Charla. Cody accidentally declined your Cameo and he's so upset about it. Like, can you please submit a new one so that he can do it? And so then I submitted that. But, we're going to share this online. Cody, we're a fan. So, please unblock us. Come on the show. We'll share some money to your charity. We can $100. We are fans of Cody Fajardo. We are Cody Fajardo fans on the podcast. I'm sorry that I tweeted an article about you using the word chicken McNuggets instead of curse words, and I'm sorry that we talked today about you not liking smoked meat. But we are fans.
Sprinkles of Jesus.
We are fans. We are fans.
That's one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Paul, you've been working on this Markcast for over a year, trying to get it off, and I just thought you needed the pep talk from Cody Fajardo. So there you go.
Okay. We're going to take a break. After that, we're going to take a break.
We're gonna toss two. We got Natey Adjei, we got Rob Vanstone, we got Paul McCallum coming on, BC Lions legend. We have all your XFL stuff, and then we have all the USFL news coming up. I'll time code everything. Well, Natey Adjei, I'm very excited for this. A color commentator with the Argos. We booked you a long time ago, and then it turned out, thank you, A, for holding the date, and then B, turned out a really good week to talk Argos football. I mean, a little bit of news going on. How are you doing so far today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. And you're right. We booked this a while ago, and I wasn't sure what I'd be doing 2 months in advance. I told you, man, I don't even know what I'm doing next week, but you booked this 2 months in advance. You said, all right, man. I'll remind you the day before, and you're true to your word. You said you work with weddings, so you're used to planning stuff ahead of time. I'm not, but I'm happy you made it work, man. I'm doing good. How are you?
We're good. So I'm excited. We have a couple of things. We obviously you're facing the America's CFL team this weekend. The BC Lions. So I'm excited about that. We're traveling in. First off, this Arbuckle trade kind of took a lot of people by surprise, at least kind of in our circles. What were your thoughts on that big trade that came out this week?
It took me by surprise because, there had been talks early on that he was on trade block, and people I talked to, it didn't seem like that was necessarily true. But with the emergence of McLeod Bethel-Thompson and, Antonio Pipkin too, don't forget about him. He's been playing really well as a backup short yardage guy. And in practice, he's been lighting it up. With all those things factoring into it, they felt like it was the best time to make this move. A lot of fans weren't too happy about it, but, there are a lot of things behind the scenes that, factors into this trade. And then another thing is, there's a lot of players that, haven't been able to play this year because of, salary cap restrictions. So there's a ton of stuff going into it, but, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, he's, finally the face of the franchise here in Toronto. There's finally a team that said, okay, he's our guy. And I have to say he's earned it. The guys in the locker room love him. The fans obviously love him. And he's the kind of guy, he can make every throw on the football field. So you're never going wrong with a guy that has that kind of horsepower. And he's done a great job of not turning the ball over this year, which is what the coaching staff wanted to see. So they went with him. And, unfortunately for Nick, he's here. Guys love him. He just wasn't healthy this year. He wasn't able to show fully what he was able to do in Calgary in 2019. So that kind of hurt him. So that the team felt it was at the right time with the trade deadline on Wednesday to make that deal.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting situation, right? Obviously, you have this human element of it too, right? Nick Arbuckle's been on so many teams. Like I saw, he posted, his wife's given birth. They're raising the baby. Now they're moving cities again. I mean, just talk about that from a player perspective. Mid-season, everything else going on, having to move, right? I mean, across the country now to figure out what's going on. We're week 13 here. I mean, it's craziness, right?
Yeah, from the player perspective, I know I put something on Twitter that, don't forget the human aspect of it, right? This guy is a guy that, has a family, right? Young family here in Toronto for the first time without their extended family around to help out, right? And also mid-season, he's already finally settled into life in Toronto, and now he has to, pack up and move, right? But, as a competitor, if I'm in Nick's shoes, I'm excited because it's another opportunity to play, right? All you want as a football player is opportunities to play a team that believes in you as their number one guy, their starter. Edmonton's not trading Nick Arbuckle to be a backup. They believe he's going to be a starter, and as a player, that's what all you ask for. That's all you want, But in terms of family life and off the field stuff, it's really hard. Like I was in a situation when I played in Edmonton where my family stayed back in Toronto, and I have to say, like, on the field, everything was good. When I'm at practice, everything is good. Playing games, everything is good. But off the field, you got to FaceTime every day, which is tough because you want to be there for all those little moments for your little kids. You want to, be there dropping them off at school, picking them up, and, all those little milestones that kids go through, right? So that's the tough part for him because he's this third team in, I think, 2 CFL seasons, right? Third team in Calgary, Ottawa, Toronto, now 14 in 2 CFL seasons, right? Oh, sorry about that. In 2 CFL seasons. So that's tough. That's tough to go through as an athlete, as a player. So, he's having to deal with that. And he's a true pro. He's a professional for a reason. But on the field, he'll be fine. Off the field, I know he'll be hurting a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously we are not in the Elks locker room, right? But it would certainly seem that acquiring Arbuckle, they getting rid of Trevor Harris was kind of making the room for him and not, Taylor Cornelius is going to be our main guy going forward. I mean, there still is. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, obviously just from the outside here, but it does seem like they're trying for the next option here and not sticking with Cornelius.
That's what it seems like, right? Like I said, you're not training for Nick Arbuckle to be a backup. He's had CFL experience, right? Right now, he goes into that quarterback room and he's got the most CFL wins. He's got the most CFL throws, most CFL reps under his belt, right? And looking from outside in, who trades for a backup quarterback? At the trade deadline, right, and gives up that kind of capital, like no one really, right? So they're bringing him in to be the starter. They see his potential, and before this season, Nick Arbuckle was one of the most coveted free agents, right? Because you're looking at him as kind of the next guy, right? He took over for Bo Levi Mitchell in 2019 and did a great job. Righted the ship and got that team into the playoffs, and so he was kind of next in line, and so that's how Edmonton is viewing him, right? As a quarterback that has the potential to be a starter and a star in this league, right? So, that's the route they're going. And obviously Taylor Cornelius, they're telling the fans, yeah, we believe in this guy. Obviously they did at that point, but when you have a chance to, kind of upgrade that room, the one position you never want to leave to chance is the quarterback position, because without a good quarterback, you have no chance in this league. So they want to bring as much talent as possible. And even though they told us Cornelius was going to be the guy, you knew any other chance they got to bring in more talent, they would take it.
Speaking about the Toronto side, with McLeod, there's, so much has been made, such a journeyman quarterback, right? We did our big episode, McLeod, we called him the king of the CFL back in like week 2 when he had his big hot start. Finally having a coach say, this is the face of our franchise, this is the person we believe behind, after being, going through so many false starts, right? Or, always having to fight for the position. I mean, what do you think that does for someone like him that's been in the league so long and has kind of persevered through so much adversity?
It's massive. I mean, if they didn't say that and he was in his role, he'd be perfectly fine, because, that's the kind of guy he is. He's kind of not, I don't want to say he's used to being a backup or used to being in the secondary role. No one ever gets used to that. He's the kind of guy that wants to be the man. But he hasn't heard that in his career, right? And to finally hear that, it's almost like a weight lifted off his shoulders. Now he can, fully just be comfortable and worry about playing football, not playing a game where, okay, if I make a couple bad throws, will I get benched, or, will I get pulled? Or he doesn't have to worry about any of those thoughts now. He's the man, right? And that feels great as an athlete, because you just want to play your best football. Like, you want to eliminate as much outside noise as possible, right? You want to be in the zone, right? And the best way to get a guy in the zone is, to make his role extremely clear. And his role is extremely clear. He's the face of the franchise. And the funny thing about McLeod Bethel-Thompson is that he's never been, the number one guy in Toronto, right? That he started, a couple games. He started games when, James Franklin was the starter in Toronto, and he came in a backup role, right? But he's in Argo's history, right? He's 7th in completions, 9th in passing yards, and 9th in touchdown passes, right? And this is a guy that's never played, like been a full-time number one from, game 1 to, game 18 in a regular season, right? So we know this guy has the tools. We know he's got the horsepower, in that arm, and, he can make every single throw on that football field. All he needed was a team to say, you're our guy. And I think he's done enough this season to prove that. And I have a good feeling he's going to run with this.
It's surprising to me. And like I said, we're McLeod fans, right? We tracked him, through the spring league back up, from the CFL to the spring league back up. It just seems, Argos were kind of on a hot streak, right? It seemed like defense, right, under, Coach Jones was really kind of leading the way. But then especially after that game on Friday, right, the loss to Montreal, I was sitting here watching it, and I finally, we turned it off and went to dinner. I mean, it just wasn't the best outing, right? And then to have this news come out, I mean, I'm glad that McLeod gets, that's great, but it's just weird timing. I mean, I know the trade line and all that, but to just get blown out and then be like, well, here's our guy. Yeah. I mean, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny. I wanted to turn it off, but obviously I couldn't because I had to, stay locked in. But it was a rough day, right? And that's not the kind of announcement you expect to hear after your team kind of gets blown out and it looks ugly. But when you go back and watch that film, right, and even the throws that McLeod Bethel Thompson was completing, it was relentless pressure the entire night, right? And there's nothing he can do about that. So when you watch the film and you take the blinders off and you kind of understand what's going on out there, there's only so much a quarterback can do when he's, there's so much pressure in his face the entire night, right? So, I think the coaches looked at it and said, okay, even though this guy was under fire, he didn't really, obviously he had a bad turnover game, but the entire season, he's been really good with turnovers, right? So, and I think he had 1 pick come into this game, not counting 2-point conversions. So, he's been doing a good job of taking care of the ball. And when you get in a situation like that, where it's kind of a blowout and he's going to force the ball, the game script changes, right? And you got to force the ball down into throws that you probably wouldn't make if it was a tight game. Then you kind of understand why those turnovers happen. But you look at it and you can kind of see that, okay, the quarterback sometimes gets a lot of the blame when things don't go right. I think the coaches watched that film and were like, okay, it wasn't really his fault. Plus the trade deadline is coming up. We got to make a move. There's some guys that have been on this roster that deserve to play. And because of, paying 2 quarterbacks that kind of money, it isn't allowed to happen. So they kind of looked at the entire picture and saw that this was the right time to make the move. But I'm with you. I was extremely surprised. I'm like, wait, we just got blown out. And then we're going to make declarations like this is our guy, you know what I mean? But, he's earned it. If you look at the totality of the season and how he's played, he has earned it. There's nothing against him. He's definitely earned it, but the timing was funny.
I'm going to ask the same question to all of our guests today. This is the episode of our title episode of the podcast this week, coming off of 3 Down did a big article about this. Rob Vanstone did a big article about this. The games this weekend, 16-37, 45-0. The Lions, 32-3 with the REDBLACKS. Does the CFL have an entertainment problem this year?
Honestly, watching the games and being invested in it, knowing the guys that are playing, I would say to me, there have been times where I'm like, oh man, this isn't as fun as I remember it being, right? But that's me being invested in knowing all the guys. Now, if I was watching as a fan and not knowing anybody, it's tough to say a lot has happened that would keep me tuned in, right? So thinking about it, there is an entertainment problem right now. And it's doing the scoring. I don't know where it went, but the CFL is supposed to be a fun league, right? 2 downs, bigger field, bigger end zone, bigger ball. The offense is always supposed to have the advantage, right? But you're not seeing that this year, right? So I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to fix it either. But this offseason, the league is going to have to take a look at itself and really ask the question is, how do we keep the young viewer entertained? How do we keep fans, from turning the TV away, right? And scoring has a lot to do with that. If you can put on scoring and highlights here and there, like people will be tuned in. They don't care, but I like defense, and a lot of people like defense, but the general fan is like fantasy football fans. They want to see scoring, they want to see action, they want to see highlights. They want to see quarterback making unbelievable throws, right? So the league is going to have to look at itself and say, how do we increase that, right? And you're not going to do that by firing all the defensive coordinators. Like, that's out of the question. You can't do that. Defensive coordinators have done a great job. They understand the league, but I think a lot has to do with, having a whole year off, right? I was reading the stat that, 30% of the CFL this year are guys on rosters had been playing their first CFL game, right? So you're losing the continuity, right? Like, back in the day when I remember watching, you had these receiving corps that had been together like, 3, 4, 5 years, right? And they were just like firing on all cylinders, right? So you don't have that anymore, especially with the 1-year contracts. You don't have that, right? So there's a lot of factors working against having that product where it's, high flying, explosive, fun offense, right? And so I'm thinking, with the whole year, whole full off season, guys coming back to the same teams, that will help some of the issues. But CFLs also got to add to that and look at itself and say, how do we tweak these rules? And defensive coaches obviously be mad, but they've got to understand, like, this is an entertainment too, right? How do we tweak these rules to, further, help these offenses? They've tried. And in the past, I remember 2014, I first got into this league. The CFL, they took out the ways defensive backs to get their hands on receivers. Like, they took that out. They were trying to help offense. So they've done some things in the past, but they've got to make it more fun because, as a fan, if you're watching and then, you there's nothing keeping you tuned in.
It's just hard. It's like I said, I'm watching the Argos game. I know I'm talking to you this week. Like I'm watching the game, and I'm like, man, this is work, right? I can barely get through. It's just it's really hard. I've seen a lot made this week too. Like you brought up about the 1-year contracts, right? Like so hard to build any sort of continuity at all. I get it, and the money and trading between the teams, and look, we've had all these quarterbacks and stuff, but there's got to be some way to incentivize the teams to want to hold on to these key players and these players to want to be with these teams. Look at Winnipeg,
Yeah. You know what? Winnipeg has done a great job, building a culture that goes beyond money. Like, I have friends on that team, and they'll say they don't want to be anywhere else. They'll take less money to play there. And that's really rare to find in pro sports, right? Especially because the careers are so short. You have a short window to make a certain amount of money. But a good friend of mine, John Rush, who actually did play in Winnipeg, I was talking to him about that this week, and he brought up, obviously in football, it's hard to guarantee contracts, right? You can't really do that with the nature of the injuries, and the owners would never go for that. But a way where maybe guarantee a portion of guys' contract, maybe like 10%, 15%, right? Depending on stature in the league, right? And if you can do something like that where, it desensitizes a team to release guys, right? Because, you're losing money if you release a guy because 10% of his contract is guaranteed. Like if he makes $100,000, that's $10,000 that he's guaranteed. That maybe that is a way to go, because I never heard that idea, but maybe that's a way to help, with these teams, to give them something in the way of, not cutting some guys. So honestly, the league has got to do something, because when the 1-year contracts, it's tough to get any continuity. Fans go out and buy a jersey, got on another team the next year because another team's going to pay them more money, right? So that's really tough.
Yeah, it's just hard morale-wise. Just knowing, like, I'm here, you want players to be invested in the cities they're in the right. Communities. I know that's what we've always heard, CFL players are so invested in building the community and doing the outreach and doing all these things. And then, if you're going to be, shipped off to Edmonton, in the middle of the season, it's hard. Final thoughts. I want to hear, obviously, Lions are traveling into Toronto this weekend. What are we making of Lions coming off of, I can't even count how many horrendous losses we're coming off now.
Yeah, and that last one was especially bad. You probably watched it, gone over it, but like to score 0 points in a CFL game that means you got totally dominated. I don't know if the last time I've seen a team get shut out like that, and that game was tough to watch. Another game that was tough to watch because Winnipeg, all facets of the game, offense, defense, special teams, just totally dominated, right? So what do I make of the Lions? I mean, they've got Mike Riley, one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL. Michael Riley, sorry, one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL. To play with him, the guy's a warrior. I know he's probably going through a tough time right now because this all he wants to do is win, right? And they've got the pieces. I know, Rick Campbell is looked at as a good head coach in this league, right? They've got offense, Durant, Burnham, Shaq Johnson, Katoy. They've got pieces, right? But I think Mike Riley's getting hit way too much this year. The line, and I don't want to call out any linemen or anything like that because their job is tough, right? But he's getting hit too much, and that's a problem they had in 2019. They did a good job in 2019 towards the end of the year, shoring it up when Kelly Bates came on and as a offensive lineman coach. But this year has been tough, and I know Mike is getting hit a lot. Michael is getting hit a lot. That's never easy for a quarterback, especially at his age. I don't know what to say, but they've got it right because they're buying for that crossover spot right now, right? At 4-6, they're probably not going to be. It's going to probably be them and Calgary, right? Fighting for that crossover spot, right? And right now it's hard to see, that unless they turn things around, it's hard to see them really get hot. And if they want to get hot and go into the playoffs, they've got to start right now and against the Toronto Argonauts. And right now, the Toronto Argonauts are 4-0 at home, right? So it's going to be tough place to play. They're not playing the best football right now. I got some friends on the team, so I'm pulling for them, but just not this week against the Argos.
Fan hat off analytically. Who do you got this weekend?
At home, Toronto. They're a different team at home, and it's so weird to watch because a lot of the things that prevent them from winning. They don't do it when they're at home. Like they'll win the turnover battle when they're at home. They'll win the penalty battle when they're at home. They just have more life when they're at home. And it's weird because it isn't that big of a home field advantage. I know Toronto's a great city and guys love sleeping in their own beds. But you look at a team like Winnipeg, right, where they're so sold out, they're so loud. Teams are getting false start penalties, right? That's a home field advantage that you think of, right? But Toronto isn't considered that right now, and it's interesting to see why this team. It's just unbelievable to see why the team plays so well at home, right? So, I could not take another team against Toronto right now. Record wise, obviously they're both coming off losses, right? But Toronto probably suffered the least embarrassing loss last week, so I've definitely got to take Toronto. And this year, after every loss Toronto's faced, they've come back with a victory. So. That's another reason why I like Toronto in this game.
Yeah, that's a polite way to say it, that there's not as much of a home field advantage in Toronto. Maybe they like scrimmage. Maybe they're just used to I'm not going to. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope we can keep your number in the Rolodex and bring you back. Yeah. But I do also feel bad for the Lions this weekend. So I do think you'll be coming up. You'll have a good game to call. But thank you so much again for sharing your time today.
No problem, man. And sorry about my picture falling down. I don't know why that happened.
You were a true professional because you were unfazed, but I was like, what is happening? So I'll have to go back and look at the replay. I'm sure that was
fun. Make it slow-mo. Try to embarrass me.
Awesome. Thanks again.
All right, brother. Take care.
Well, Rob Vanstone, I'm so excited, friend of the show, have you back on. I think we talked previously, it was like before the season. So now we're week 13. We're into this. First off, everyone wants to know, how is Candy doing?
Well, she's got a cone on her head right now. She's been, they want to make an appearance. She has some paws that are kind of inflamed.
Oh no!
So we have to have a cone on her head so that she can't lick her paws and make them worse. So say hi to. Here's Candy.
Candy's looking.
Isn't she adorable?
She's good. I know my wife would want to know.
Good girl.
Yes, everyone wants to know. So that's good. Well, here I am very excited to have you on in a week. I don't know if great minds think alike, but I certainly think that my mind might think similarly to your great mind sometimes. Our episode this week, does the CFL have an entertainment problem? 3 downs, doing articles now. I see, Rob Vanstone, right, is you're writing about, I had the name of it here. It was the once exciting CFL league, right?
Pardon me, she distracted me.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. I mean, and I hope I don't sound too curmudgeonly, but you wait all this time, wait 2 years for football to resume, and then it's just not very good. And I'm not a CFL hater. I think I'm the antithesis of that. I've been watching this league for 50 years. I've loved it. I've had season tickets. I've got rider shares. My mom and I used to go to the Grey Cup every year when I was a teenager. It's one of my great sporting loves, is Nick Handy. And she's going to crash this thing for sure. And just to see it come back and then not really come back with a flourish is really disappointing. And people say, yeah, it's the people attribute it to the layoff, whatever. Thing is, I've seen some really good football games this year that haven't been at the CFL level, which have had some of the same dynamics. Players have been off for 2 years. That hasn't prevented high school football from having a classic a few nights ago. College football in Canada has had some really good games. And junior footballs, there's a local team here called the Regina Thunder, and of their 8 regular season games this year, 3 of them were absolute classics. If any of them were I think played under the CFL umbrella this year, they would have been called the best CFL game of the season. So Canadian football is still very compelling and entertaining to watch. It just isn't so often enough at the pro level, and that's really, really distressing.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously we've talked about this, for weeks now. It's just coming to the forefront now. It seems like the collective online, because it's week 13. Like, it's week 13. Yeah. I said today, if this rumored USFL is launching here that we're tracking next spring, right? We'll be crowning the champion week 13, 14. We're months into the season here, and this is still, it seems like people now are finally losing their patience, right? It does seem that way, that more people now feel this way, or are at least vocalizing those opinions. Yeah,
it just, and I've heard some people say in rebuttal, well, what have you got against defensive football? Well, I'm not sure it's defensive football. I think it's defective football. And that's what's really getting to me. And not only that, there's just a real sameness to a lot of the games. I think the defenses in general have the same philosophy: bend but don't break, and take what the defense gives you seems to be the unavoidable perhaps offensive philosophy. So it's a game with 3 downs instead of 4. I think once upon a time that was perceived as being more exciting than American football, because 3 downs would compel teams to throw the ball more often. But now you're seeing it in American football, be it college, pros. There's no shortage of balls in the air. But what you're getting in the CFL is defensive coordinators saying, okay, because there's only 3 downs, we don't think you can execute every play perfectly enough to march 12 plays for 75 yards and a touchdown. One play goes wrong, and you're either punting or you're in a second and long situation, and it's a distinct advantage to the defense. So as a result, they're just daring you to take 5, 6, 7 yards at a time. And if there's one incompletion or one run that stopped for a yard or two, then you have to change your whole philosophy. So the defenses are playing that sort of umbrella coverage, and it's just underneath pass, hitch screen, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not very interesting to watch. The CFL that I knew and still love, ideally, is a game with a lot more wide open play. And especially when you consider the size of the field. There's so much potential there because of the size of the field. And this potential is not even close to being realized this year. And it's not just a pie in the sky thing to hope for something better when you have seen something better for the vast majority of the years that have been spent watching the Canadian Football League. And it was 1971 when I first went to a game that I vividly remember, August 27th for that. Rough Riders beat Ottawa 42-21.
There you go. It's hard because, and there are differences between hating on something, and then there's differences of constructively criticizing or analyzing something. Because I see, the second anybody says, okay, the game isn't working this year, it's like, oh, wow, you're a hater. It's like, well, no, you can, to me, it's backwards intuitive at this point, where we say maybe the CFL athlete is a B+ compared to the NFL, right? But the game itself is better. But then it's like, then you almost would want more downs in the CFL, right? And more chances for, it's like almost the NFL. It should almost be the reverse, right? That the NFL should be 3 downs if they have like the peak athlete. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost counterintuitive at that point.
I think at one point the 3 downs were advantageous to the CFL in comparison to American football. But now I wonder, and I'm not advocating a change. Now I wonder if it's counterproductive because it plays into the hands of the defense. And a lot of this talk came up when the discussion started about the XFL and whether the rules would be changed or compromised. And I wrote a column saying, pretty much, I think that was the impetus for the first conversation we ever had, Reed, was, that the Canadian game and the rules should be sacrosanct. But now the game with those same rules isn't what it could be or should be. I'm not advocating a change to 4 downs, but I'd like to see something better than is being played. And when I see that game being played better in terms of entertainment at other levels, that tells me that Canadian football isn't deficient, but it tells me that there's deficiencies within the Canadian Football League. Now, you talked about constructive criticism. I think that's the vexing thing. What do you do to make it better? Aside from something drastic, like the league noticed in 2014 that something was happening to the passing game. There were only 3 1,000-yard receivers in 2014. So they brought in the rule that really cracked down on illegal contact on receivers. And just pretty much if you graze a receiver, you're getting a 10-yard penalty as a defensive back. And that brought back some of the offense that had been diminishing, at least passing-wise. And some of those calls were ticky-tack. But it did, I think, lead to a restoration of the passing game at a level that was more reminiscent of what the CFL has been. We're never going to go back to the early 90s when it was just crazy. Those were like Madden games every week. I'd like to see it, but I don't think you're getting back there. But I'd sure like to see a game, see situations where both teams are in the 30s from every now and then. It just seems to be, you can almost mark every game down to be 21-18 or 17-13, and that's what the NFL was in the 60s and 70s, and when everybody was saying how boring it was in comparison to the CFL. And I think there's other issues as well. I think the league's in a situation now where they really need to replenish some of the talent. They lost some. There just doesn't seem to be the playmakers that this league had a few years ago, and it's some of the quarterbacks aren't performing at the levels that I think we're expecting. Maybe it's just an aberration because of a talent deficiency. If this persists for 2 or 3 years, then you really got to take a close look at it. At this point, it might just be a 1-year situation, and obviously this year has been not the greatest because of so many factors not pertaining to football, but nonetheless affecting the game. I get the year off. I get the continuity issues. I got to think by week, like I said, week 13. Week 13, yeah.
We got to get, I'm looking here, we're talking scores, so week 10, we had 5 games that week. Obviously you had the Blue Bombers blowing out the Elks, but then it was, 22-19 Stamps Rough Riders, 24-23 Argos Ticats, 2016 Alouettes Redblacks, and then, the Redblacks played again with the Argos 16-35. But, 3 of those games. So then you get all these people and they go, well, see, they're exciting games because they're all within one score. It's like I don't think a 19-22 game that came down to a field goal at the end because no one could get any touchdowns for the entire second half of the game is exciting, right?
You can get look at the Riders Calgary game last week. It ended up 20-17, and the last few minutes were undeniably exciting. But a lot of that game was pretty pedestrian, and a lot of the things that the Rough Riders hadn't done well in back-to-back losses to Calgary, they continued not to do very well in the victory, but they were more resourceful and resilient, and they found ways to win. Cody Fajardo 2 years ago was one of the premier deep passers in the Canadian Football League. This year, a deep pass for the Rough Riders is 6 yards. So he's still Cody Fajardo, but something's changed here. And the Rough Riders are by far, I think, the worst deep passing team in the league. And I don't think there's a matter of their quarterback getting old. He's only 29 years of age. There's just something has changed, but you just don't see the. There's just not the vibe. There's just not the buzz, and maybe it's not all attributable to the way the game is played. Maybe that's a product of the circumstances as well. Because I don't think the personalities can really come out when you're just doing everything by Zoom. I don't think there's a lot of stories that just aren't being told or can't be told because everything is so. Just so regimented right now, and I think that takes a little bit of the zest away from the game as well. I haven't done a Rider Zoom session for like 2 weeks. I just find it so dry. And that's not a commentary on the Rough Riders. That's just a commentary on the times. And if you're going to tell a story and tell it with some, really get into it, I think you need more time with an athlete and more of a flow than you can be generated with one or two questions in a Zoom and then it's on to the next person. So from a storytelling aspect, I find it kind of disappointing as well. And maybe that's affecting my perception of the entire league, because it just isn't as much fun when you can't spend 5-10 minutes talking to somebody and try to get story. And then it's your story. It's not being shared with everybody else. So there's just a lot of sameness in terms of the presentation of the off day things. And then there's a lot of sameness when you look at the games. If it can be, Winnipeg versus BC, or it can be Hamilton versus Montreal. Everybody seems to have the same offense. Everybody seems to have the same defense. Everybody seems to have the same playbook. I don't know why they close practices anymore, because everybody's got the same playbook. They might as well send it to the opposition and say, here's what we're doing, because it's the same thing that the other team's doing. It's just a matter of when are they going to make those calls. There's no innovators. There's nothing that really strikes me as distinctive about anything. And it kind of reminds me of the NHL. You look at, it can be, I hope you're enjoying the Kraken, but you look at, it can be Columbus versus Florida, or it can be the Islanders versus the Coyotes. The games are going to pretty much look the same. The CFL is, I think, suffering from that sameness, not only during the games, but on the off days when there's games being discussed in retrospect or games being previewed. There's just not a lot of zip there.
Well, I mean, I think it's something to be said when you have someone like Rod Peterson, right? That is like the daytime whatever, daytime Canadian sports show, and it's like, we're focusing on NHL. We're not leading with CFL anymore. And you're like, wow, okay, because I think that speaks a lot to like the draw and the numbers. I mean, I can tell you, when there's USFL updates or XFL updates, interest in our show is 2 or 3 times, right, what it is with just talking CFL. As much as I've tried to stack the show with smart people like you and Natey and Paul McCallum today, I'll be curious to see this week's viewership, right, compared to weeks when it's like, oh, The Rock tweeted about something. I mean, it's a weird, like, intangible people are clamoring for this. Like, Grey Cup tickets aren't sold out. They're not even close to being sold out. We're trying to promote this. Randy Ambrosie is doing that, but then it seems like we want there to be interest, but there's not interest. It's very weird. I'm very torn with it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally get it. And I think I might be an example to that effect. I've just looked at it. I mean, we've got Murray McCormick's our football writer, and Murray does a terrific job, and he's on the Zooms every day, and he's at practices every day. But I found after a while it was counterproductive to have 2 people tied up on the same Zoom call, getting the same Zoom quotes. And there's such a limited pool of stories because from the availability standpoint. So, I just reached a point where I thought, I don't think we need 2 people telling these stories, because there's just not a lot of them that are available to be told, given the parameters that now exist. And that's not the fault of the Rough Riders. That's not the fault of anybody. That's just the way things are this year. But I thought as well, I think there's a lot of stories here that are fun to tell. And I can tell them with some freshness and some access that's not afforded via the Canadian Football League. So, for example, I've got a story running in Friday's Leader Post on Cole Sillinger, an 18-year-old hockey player from Regina. He's now with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and his dad played in the NHL. And his dad's dad, Mike Sillinger, his final NHL game was played at Madison Square Garden, and he scored a goal in his final NHL game. And his son Cole is going to be playing at Madison Square Garden for the first time Friday night. I thought that was a cool story. I did something for today's paper on a Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League game that began at one arena and ended at a different arena in town due to ice problems. I thought that was a really fun, cool story. And I find that it almost hasn't been a conscious decision. I just think I've been kind of following the scent to where the fresh, interesting, unique stories are. And I'm not overlooking the fact that the Rough Riders are still the bread and butter here. We still have something on in the paper every day, but there's just other things there that I find really charge my batteries a lot more than writing about the CFL when there's just not a lot of diversity in terms of what you can write about. So I'm really enjoying the high school football game that ended in a Hail Mary, and just all the stories outside the CFL. And then what happens is as the game day draws closer. For example, for Saturday's paper, I'll have a column advancing Rough Riders versus Montreal. And then, of course, emanating from that, there'll be more Rider stuff. And if there's something huge that warrants a postscript, then, of course, that'll be written about. But I just don't think there's enough to carry the CFL story-wise during the week, given the way everything is presented. But I think there's a ton of stories with everything going on in the sporting universe now, something we didn't have a year ago, especially here, that they've been energizing. And that's where I've been going during the week. And I never used to do that during football season. It was riders. And then for a change of pace, riders. That was it. You could pretty much put me down from June to November. And if I wrote a column, there's probably 95% certainty that it was about the Rough Riders. Lately, maybe 40%. And maybe the fact that the product isn't as invigorating is factoring into that as well. There have been some really good sporting events held in Saskatchewan lately. Very few of them have been held at Mosaic Stadium, except in terms of junior football and high school football. So
it's just
that's a really long answer. I apologize.
No, it's good. But because we scheduled you to come on ahead of time, but then, like I said, it was serendipitous that you write this article, or I saw it last night. I don't know if it came out yesterday, I assume. But why did you feel compelled to write? And it is all is not swell in the once exciting CFL. I mean that the tagline. So what inspired you to write that right now, week 13 here?
Well, I think last Saturday was a real catalyst for it. They had a triple header. First game was 32-3. Second game was 45-0. And the third game, it was 20-17, and it was close, but it wasn't by any means a classic. 29 years ago to the day, also on a Saturday, the Rough Riders played Calgary as they did last Saturday. So on a Saturday, October 23rd, 29 years apart. October 23rd, 1993, Rough Riders beat Calgary 45-43. And Dave Ridgway kicked a 34-yard field goal on the last play. Riders led 35-10 at halftime. Doug Flutie brought the Stampeders back. Doug Flutie threw for 377 yards in the second half and 4 touchdowns in the second half. Ken Austin for the Rough Riders had 312 passing yards by halftime. Doug Flutie and Ken Austin that day combined for 1,093 passing yards, 546 for Austin, 500 and I think one fewer. It was 548. I can't even remember. They were both in the 540. Yeah. And my math is deserting me right now. Just it's probably the best regular season game I've ever seen in the Canadian Football League. And so I had that going through my head. It was the same day that Joe Carter hit a World Series winning home run for the Blue Jays, and everybody forgot the Ryder Calgary Classic. But I've never seen anything quite like that 48-45 Ryder game that day. It was just amazing. And so then you look at the 3 games in a row between the Rough Riders and Calgary. The scores were 23-17, 22-19, and 20-17. So in each case, the point totals, the combined point totals in that game were fewer than either team scored on October 23rd, 1993, when it was 48 for the Riders and 45 for Calgary. And, it just... that's the degree to which the pendulum has swung. Those are the extremes that we're dealing with. So that kind of factored into it too, because there's that Saturday, October 23rd, and I'm thinking, man, I remember that game 29 years ago. And then they rolled out a triple header that was just really lousy. And the other thing is, once upon a time, I would have set the PVR for those games if I wasn't going to be sitting on the couch watching them. I had no inclination or interest in recording those games. I couldn't go for a bike ride fast enough last Saturday afternoon. I just got back in time for the Rider game. And that was telling, too, that I just had no interest in following those games actively. And then I went on my phone and checked the results, and I congratulated myself on not PVRing them. What a waste of electricity that would have been. So it would have been the only electricity resulting from those games. So I think all of that conspired, Reed, to the point where I wasn't interested in those games. I was certainly validated for not being interested in those games. And I didn't like the fact that I wasn't interested in those games. I mean, back in 1980, when I was 16 years old, I had a chance to go on a bus trip down to Minnesota to watch the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Minnesota Vikings. And you know why I didn't go? Because there was a CFL game on TV that afternoon. I had a chance to go down to the States and watch an NFL game for free. They were offering us a free bus trip. But I didn't go because I didn't want to miss the Argonauts versus the Bombers or something. It wasn't even the Rough Riders playing. That's the degree to which CFL would once stop me in my tracks. and to be as indifferent as I was to games not involving the Rough Riders last Saturday really told me how things have changed. Maybe that's a commentary on me. Things change over 41 years, except my voice is still the same. But I think the changing nature of the game has also contributed to that, because I wasn't that person even 2 or 3 years ago. But this year, I just don't find it that compelling. I think there's a lot of people who would agree. I have yet to receive one email from somebody who said, no, that's ridiculous. It's great. What have you got against defensive football? Why do you hate the Canadian Football League? You get a few Twitter comments, but I was expecting more of a backlash. Or people say, "Oh, are you just being negative? Why are you picking holes in this? We're so glad to have the CFL back after 2 years." There wasn't any real buzz. And the other thing too, and you realize I'm rambling, but what I've also noticed is that there's just not a lot of feedback in general on the Rough Riders. I'm certain 2 or 3 years ago, if the Rough Riders lost back-to-back games to Calgary, my inbox would have been absolutely full, and Twitter would have been going crazy. And what I found after those back-to-back losses, I maybe got 4 or 5 emails about each game. And then the Riders beat Calgary, and again, there just didn't seem to be any real buzz resulting from that victory. And again, maybe that's a me issue. Maybe people just aren't interested in communicating with me anymore. But it wasn't that long ago a Rough Rider loss, period, to anybody would make my inbox just blow up. So what has changed? Are people as engaged by the product as they used to be? Maybe this is all symptomatic of a malaise that's hit the Canadian Football League, and how they get out of it, I don't pretend to have the answer. I just know that it's not what it was, at least in this estimation.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to let you go here in a minute. We're gonna have Paul McCallum hop on, but I don't think it's you. And it's what's crazy to me is, we got into all this XFL stuff and everything else, and F you guys, and the CFL is the great, all the stuff that happened, and and to have just really kind of a wet fart of a season right now. I mean, we're Winnipeg is going to come. I mean, we have our tickets. We're going to the Grey Cup. We're doing everything right. I mean, we have our tickets. We will be there. We have our flights. We have everything. But to go knowing Winnipeg's going to win against whoever, it doesn't matter who is there, and just to have all this, I'm like, okay. I mean, if this would have come out and really shocked the world this year, and then at least had some sort of you get what I'm saying? Like, after all of this, in the 6 months of all this hate that I got, and now it's like, this is what we're talking about, is 45-0 with the Lions. It's like, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah, no, it's and the playoffs could very well salvage things. I remember covering the Grey Cup in Hamilton in '96, and the CFL was on death's door at that point. And the whole week leading up to the game, a lot of the storylines were, is this the last Grey Cup? The CFL was in such trouble. Nobody was really complaining about the product that time, but the finances were in such a terrible state. And suddenly there's this amazing Grey Cup game between Doug Flutie again, and Toronto and Edmonton, and Toronto won 43-37. Just this beautiful game in the snow. And afterwards, it was just like, this is what Canadian football should be. In '89, again, finances were an issue for the league, and the Riders had the 43-40 Grey Cup victory over Hamilton. That game is still, I think, the best advertisement ever for the CFL. Sometimes a real good playoffs can that's what resonates with people, and that's the memory that lingers, and maybe that can have a positive effect on the perception of the league. In 1889, nobody thought the Edmonton Eskimos were going to lose. Now the Elks, they were 16-2. The 16 victories are still a league record for regular season victories. They didn't even make it to the Grey Cup that year. A 9-9 Rider team went into Edmonton and won 32-21. So maybe that can happen. I'm not, you don't rule anything out when it's a one-game showdown. It's not a best of 7, and the elements can certainly change a game. One hit can change a game. If the Bombers are rusty after this extended break between games that actually mean anything, if they don't have that kind of edge that they need in the first quarter, and somebody can get a jump on them, well, suddenly they're playing a different game than they're accustomed to playing. And that's a team that hasn't been chasing a lot this year. What if they're put in a situation just due to rust, that suddenly they're trying to come back from 10-0, and this is what they're really accustomed to this year. And then strategies change, and maybe people panic because there's a lot at stake with this loss, and nerves get tight. And so much of the game is psychological. So you never know. in 1972, which is the last time the Winnipeg Blue Bombers hosted the West Division final. Nobody thought they were going to lose to Saskatchewan. Winnipeg hadn't lost at home all year. The Riders were 8-8, and they went into Winnipeg and won 27-24 to get to the Grey Cup, which was also in Hamilton in December. So maybe this year is a good omen for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Maybe Winnipeg isn't as invulnerable as they seem to be. I saw the 89 Eskimos. I saw the 72 Bombers, and strange things can happen. It's Canadian football, but there needs to be something to make more games more compelling, because Winnipeg just seems to be they're squelching everybody, and that I think that's altering the perception as well, because they were party to one of the games on the weekend that just wasn't very good through no fault of their own. They put up 45 points. I'd love to see more teams put up 45 points, but the zero on the other end really wasn't too flattering. So.
I'm glad that we could get you back on. I didn't want to have you back on too soon in the season, so I think this was a good time. I appreciate your time. We'll be chatting here, and I'll be following your work, and I'm excited to see. Hopefully, we'll get a turnaround here heading into the Grey Cup, because I am a little terrified right now. So thank you so much again.
I hope you have a wonderful trip to it if we don't talk before that, and I hope you enjoy everything even though it'll be a bit of a diminished festival this year due to COVID. I've been to a ton of Grey Cups, a lot of them that I didn't attend for vocational purposes, but just because I love it. And you will absolutely enjoy every second of it. Even if the game doesn't turn out well, the festival will make it happen, and you'll have a great time. And I hope you enjoy it, because that's your first exposure to something like this, and it'd be a shame if it wasn't what you're hoping it would be. So here's a good luck wish for that one.
Yeah, and all our love to Candy, and you two have a good day.
You too. Thanks so much, Reed. It's great to chat with you again.
Thanks. Well, Paul McCallum, thank you so much for coming back on and making the time. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, thanks. Thanks for having me back.
So in the time since you've been on the podcast last, we have now adopted the BC Lions, one of your former teams, as our official team. I have coined them America's CFL team. Do you support me in that campaign?
Yeah, I think so. I really do. It's we're in the West Coast, Vancouver, big city, and it's a good market. And if you're going to have a team in the NFL or in the United States that they should follow, it should be BC.
How have you enjoyed the season thus far? I messaged you. I said, have you been keeping up? You said you have. What have you thought are big? It seems like a lot of the online chatter right now is asking if the CFL is entertaining enough this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's entertaining football, but I think the way things have gone because of COVID, it has affected the play a little bit. I don't think there's any question in that. But, the shortened training camp, shortened preseason, and when you're not able to prepare properly, then I think it does affect you.
Do you think by week 13 that maybe there should be a little bit more cohesion? I can't speak than there was, maybe week 2 or 3.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, football's a funny game. I mean, you're going to have that cohesion. You should have that cohesion, but at the same time, football's a physical game. So, I mean, you're going to be losing players with injury and whatnot. If you're, just so happens the Lions have lost a pretty explosive player, and sure, the backups have to step in and do what they need to do, but it does affect your team. So for the Lions, specifically, I think that, they started off a little slow. They started to pick things up, and with some injuries and whatnot, I think they're lagging a little bit. But I think as a whole as well, there's teams like Winnipeg. I mean, they're super strong. Their defense, their offense is very potent as well. They're fun to watch. So, I think when you want to talk about how the teams are looking, and people saying it's not entertainment, you've got a small amount of teams compared to watching the NFL. But those teams in the NFL that are struggling, they don't talk about them. They always talk about how's Phoenix doing, how's Tampa Bay doing. How's Kansas City doing? Things like that. I think up here, when there are teams that are struggling, it's just magnified.
Yeah, and especially with having some dog games, right? Like a 45-0. I don't know if we maybe don't need to talk about. Did you watch that game? Thoughts on the loss and Winnipeg's dominance?
Well, that's just it. I mean, Winnipeg, it's just the way it is. Winnipeg, best team in the league right now. Their defense, the statistic I think for the points allowed in the fourth quarter is incredible. They're strong all over. Their front line's strong. Their linebackers are good. Their defensive backs are good. So I mean, it's hard to pick them apart. The Lions are struggling with their running game, and so Mike's and still with their blocking up front. So Mike, he doesn't have a lot of time for anything. I mean, I think one play, he might have had a 3 or 5 step drop, and boom, he got hit before he could set his feet. So, I mean, when you're one-dimensional in the sense of your running game strong, you got to start throwing the ball. They just pin their ears back and come at you. So it makes it really tough. So, yeah. And I mean, like I said, Winnipeg, they're all around balanced team, and they beat BC in all 3 facets of the game.
Obviously, BC traveling, to Toronto this weekend. I just talked with Natey Adjei from there about, the big Arbuckle trade to Edmonton. Thoughts on any of that and moving players around? I mean, obviously before the trade deadline, but quite a big trade. It's like the 4th team now for Arbuckle here in a couple of years.
Yeah, when it comes to the quarterbacks and other players, sometimes change is good. And, I think when Bethel Thompson was getting in there early on, and then they pulled him, he was struggling, and put Arbuckle in and, did okay. And then they put him, Bethel Thomas back in. And, I think Arbuckle's different scenery. He's a good quarterback. I think that, good things can happen. Different teams, when players are struggling and they switch, it's amazing to see how they flourish with other teams and schemes and organizations, and just change the scenery. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
How do you feel about BC going into Toronto? They're 4-0 at home this season. Natey politely called it. He goes, it's not like Toronto has a huge home field advantage, which I said, well, that's quite the polite way of saying it. But thoughts about them traveling in there and trying to bounce back and get something of this season kind of going correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I heard Mike actually, Riley on a post game talk show, and he said it best. It's after coming off a loss like that, the team's got to step it up. They got to put their head down. They got to get to work, and you know what? If they could just concentrate and execute, do the simple things right, catch the balls when they're thrown to them. Just the little things add up, and I think that any team at any time can be beaten. Over my career, I've seen it where you've got a team like Winnipeg that can be as dominant as they are. Just for whatever reason, no explanation, they can get beat by anybody. And so, the Lions, they have to have the mentality to go in there that they're going to work hard and do what they've been working all week on, and just go and execute. And it's why not turn it around this week against Toronto?
Obviously, new ownership coming in for the Lions, right? Amar Doman and company, trying to really revitalize. He seems to be making a big conscious effort of, having his face out there, right? Promoting family nights and promoting the cultural awareness nights, promoting all these things. Thoughts on that and trying to kind of revitalize the franchise?
Yeah, I think it was a really good move on Mr. Braley's estate to pick somebody, a local owner. And a fan. I haven't had the pleasure to meet him yet, but everything that I've heard and heard him say is very, very positive, wanting to build up the community again and get back that pride, that local pride in the team. So I'm glad that, he knows it's not something that he's just going to purchase and make a lot of money, and that he knows it's not going to happen overnight. And I'm actually, I'm excited to see what he does with the team.
Do you think that there's still, actionable things that can be done to really, I hear this all the time, right? BC and Montreal, Toronto. I mean, What are you looking to see? What do you want to see out of an owner and out of someone building, trying to get the fan base back?
Well, for me, to be honest with you, it's an atmosphere. I had a potential owner in the past ask me what I thought about getting the fans in the stadium and getting that atmosphere back and everything else. And for me, it's got to be affordable. I mean, we're in Vancouver. If you want to take a family to a hockey game, it's probably $500. It's ridiculous. But the football, it's entertaining. When you get out there, you're going to have that atmosphere of excitement and what's going on around inside the stadium. All of those things add up, and they sort of like the atmosphere when it's electric, it breeds more fun and excitement. So, if you just get people in the stadium, if you got to cut the ticket prices, I think a good game, the person who's in there, he's at the nosebleeds, and you have a full stadium. You put on promotions and things like that. Of course, you're going to put in a winning product, but I mean, it all ties together. It's got to be affordable. And unfortunately, if that stadium is not at least half full, it's hard to get that atmosphere. So another thing, which is a little bit off topic, but I'd like to see them look at possibly the Whitecaps and the Lions having their own private venue in the suburbs, because I think the football is a blue collar sports, and I think if they were to have a smaller venue, a little bit more intimate, I think it would help a lot to bring those fans and make it something special to do. And another thing, I don't think I've mentioned this, or possibly I did, here in Vancouver, all the high school kids play American football. And for me, I just have a hard time with that when you have a kid who's playing a position that an NFL player would be playing. How is he going to relate to a Canadian player as a receiver, for example, or a slot back? We have motion, and how is he going to relate to the CFL game when the position he's playing and he's going to idolize is an American player? I mean, there's so many little things that I think need to be looked at to help the game as a whole in Canada, and in BC especially. I think that's one of them. And you're wearing BC gear. It's very difficult to find BC gear in Vancouver as well. So another thing I think that needs to be looked at to help build the quality of the game and get the people excited about the team again. When I first started, I mean, we had 45,000 people in the stands, and now you're lucky to get 20. So it's sad right now, but I think with the local owner, it's possible.
Yeah, it's this is actually one of our listeners made this for us. It's a custom.
Oh, nice.
It says Mark.
Nice.
They sent one. They sent one to me, and then they sent Argos one to Paul, because my co-host is an Argos fan. We won't hold that against him, but it's that grassrootsy stuff, right? Like we're trying to do, because people, some people get on us, but we'll. Who cares about what? I'm like, well, at least we're talking about this, right? And we're trying to figure stuff out. It is just frustrating that we have this new ownership come in. It really seemed like it all was going well for BC. And then it's been like all these losses at home and these horrendous losses and these last second losses. And now this blowout. I mean, it really does seem like, if you're Mr. Doman at this point, you're like, what is going on? You know what I mean? Yeah, no. And I get it. It's a bit frustrating. And, there's things that, he's going to have to look at. When you first, whatever kind of business, when you first get it, I think it's really smart to just kind of keep things how they are and look around and assess them from that perspective, as opposed to just coming in and turning everything upside down. So, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a process to change things how he sees, and that'll take a little bit of time, but they've got a good quarterback. There's no question there. But they just I think they just need a little bit of a better supporting cast around him. On the other two facets, for me specifically, looking at special teams, they've had some punts blocked, a lot of return yardage that is, concerning and things like that. But it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's a game, so you just time to work at it. Before I let you go, obviously Winnipeg is kind of the cream of the crop in the West. Who are, Argo's making moves, right? Montreal's making moves here. Who are you keeping an eye on in the East, presuming that Winnipeg steamrolls here through to the Grey Cup?
The other team in the East for me, Kahari Jones, a good friend of mine in Montreal. He's got a way of pulling his teams together and making good things happen. Never ever doubt anything that Kahari's involved with. So I think Montreal would be an interesting thing out of the East. If anything is going to happen, that's kind of the team I'd pull for.
Yeah, we have, the big Trevor Harris trade, right? Certainly making moves here. Still a lot of daylight here in the season, right? It is closing down here.
Yeah, it is. But like I said, it's closing down, but there's some things that I think there's still time to happen. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And, like I said, you can have teams that have dominated, I think, early 2000s when you had teams like Calgary that were running through the league, and then they get to the show and things change, right? So it's never over till it's over. So I'm always one watching a game. I always watch it to the end because in the CFL, unlike the NFL, the last 2-3 minutes of a football game can really make a difference. A lot of points can be scored.
Well, Paul, I appreciate you coming back on today, making time, running around here. So thank you again, and I'll keep the BC merchandise, visible here, at least the one in the bar in Seattle. But I appreciate you making the time, and hopefully we can call you back on here and get your thoughts at some point in the future.
No, thanks a lot. I appreciate having me on there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
And welcome back to the Markcast. I want to thank our guests, Natey, Rob, and Paul, all showing up. We appreciate you coming on the Markcast.
Now, I should give us some more context. So, longtime listeners will know, back in the day, we were trying to get Cardale Jones, former DC Defenders quarterback, onto the podcast because we had just started and we had like 10 listeners or whatever. So we used Book Cameo to basically do that joke. It said, I'm Mark, I'm getting my cast taken off, and Cardale Jones did a whole thing, and then we tweeted about it, and he blocked us, and so then we called him Charmin Jones because he's soft like Charmin, toilet paper, all that stuff. So there's
a T-shirt you can get at our merch site.
Yeah, that says Charmin Soft. So anyway, it's too long. because it is that long to play like the uncut one. I don't think it's funny enough to hear it again, not cut. But you can imagine like the prompt that was used to get a lot of that information out there. But he really did a good job because I kept saying like cast. He really got his cast. He's really excited about his cast because you got to get him to say it more than one time so you can kind of cut it together. So anyway, that
went on forever. It felt like
it was like a minute. Yeah, it's long. It's the uncut one is a minute 7, and the one edited is a minute 15 because it's got the bumpers on the minute 15.
Got it.
Anyway, so that is it. But please share that. We want to get Cody on the podcast. So
please,
or at least unblock us. So anyway,
all right. Moving on, Dany Garcia and Gerry Cardinale from Redbird Capital Partners. They're going to do a live stream Invest in Sports event. What?
Yeah, they did this today. So this came out. So it was. This is funny. So they were trying to get everyone to do Sportico. It was like $100 to get to watch this online thing. So luckily we have smart listeners. So we found like the unlisted YouTube video and I just shared it with everyone. So no one actually it had like a lot of views on the unlisted thing because we tweeted it. So because the whole thing was about, business and growing. So I did pull a couple sound bites. Paul, this is a little lengthy. It's about 2 minutes, but this is because I didn't want to just pull the quotes because I didn't want to get into like another months, years debate. Remember, we had the whole thing with Dany. So
that happened again today, didn't it?
Well, this is because of that. So these are the quotes. So I'm going to play this soundbite. It's about 2 minutes. This is with. Can we have This is with Dany, and then Gerry Cardinale talks after that. So just we'll sit here and listen. But anyway, I don't want to preface too much. But this is them talking today about the XFL timelines, and you'll see why I pulled these clips.
Can we have sort of an emergency board meeting of the XFL right now? If 2 makes a quorum, that's fine. You two have the discussion. What is the discussion now? Gerry, what do you say to Dany? Dany, what do you say to Gerry? Where are we? Where are we going?
Look, it's the same discussion that we had when we first decided to come together, which is, how do we build a company that is both the convergence of live event entertainment and sport. And again, it's that what we talk about today is exactly what we started out doing a year ago. And it's been a little over a year ago that we came together. And it's really the overlay of everything that they do in terms of a real entertainment company with an engagement with fans that is global in orientation, that is delivering must-carry content.
Global.
And, my input will be, how do we make this a company? How do we get this to pay for itself? And you put that together, and that's where the magic happens. And we're in the middle of that right now. And you'll be hearing from us, as Dany will tell you, you'll be hearing from us, with an increasing crescendo over the next many months, because we're ready. We're getting ready to start to debut some of the things that we've been working on.
Dany, what's the market feedback been? What are you hearing from folks that you're pitching?
So from our feedback, what's interesting, what we continuously hear, especially in our relationships, is what's next? Where is it? What's happening? Our partners, our media partners, our entertainment partners, our sports partners, our consumer product sports partners, all have the confidence because they've worked with us historically. So they know what it means when we begin to add dimensionality to a very linear type of business plan. Right. So all of a sudden you're having 1 month and it's as if you've been in business 3 years, right? You're adding depth, you're executing multiple layers at the same time so that fandom and the athletes and the property is being experienced in a much larger way. So what we continuously hear is when are you ready to talk to us? What do you have next? What can we know? And I think that's very, very exciting. I think there's a challenge in what we're doing because for our fans, for the fandom, we have to stay so quiet, right? We can't be quite as transparent as we want to be because of the amount of infrastructure that's happening in strategic planning. But for our partners who are in the business and understand the business, there's an incredible anticipation. And I think that's very exciting.
So coming soon, they're mad they can't be so transparent. Coming in the many months, I would say January. I don't think there's any reason we announce any hires before then. I thought the global aspect of it, of Gerry, was interesting to talk about that. A lot of the other stuff is business speak. I know it's too long. I didn't want to cut it, but do you know what I'm saying there? That Dany, I thought it was a good, we get that people are very frustrated.
Yeah, it was an olive branch, basically. Hey, we're working on some things. We can't, divulge all those things yet, but please believe that we're working on some things. So, I think that helps cool the fires down where, you don't got people like Arash going, oh, now it's a 3 times failed league. It's kind of cooling everything down and saying, okay, just be patient. We'll roll it all out and eventually you'll see the plan come into fruition.
Yeah, so it was good. I wouldn't, if you really want the video, you can DM me. I can send you the private link. It's like a 25, it's a good, it's like a good 20, 25 minute thing. I watched it while I ate lunch today, but those were kind of the main points that I pulled from that. But just, I want people to know, I'm not making excuses for the league, but just I think that Dany knows, right, that the silence is deafening. I thought that was good. And then them really taking the time and spending, 1 month is the equivalent of many months of work that they're doing, putting in, and that they are getting ready very soon to unveil all that. So
cool stuff. Moving on, though, the Cleveland Guardians roller derby team has filed a federal lawsuit to block the Cleveland Guardians baseball team from using the new name per WKYC in Cleveland, not Cincinnati. The Derby Club says it has common law trademark rights dating back to 2013. They also hold the web domain and social media accounts.
Well, because we have the New York Guardians. Remember, we talked about that. So now, this has been a long time coming with the Cleveland Guardians roller derby, but I saw Mark post a news hub who cares about roller derby? The XFL needs. I'm now you're going to piss off the roller derby fans, Mark. You need to be careful. But
Canceled.
Yeah. But anyway, so I don't think the New York Guardians name is long for this world, but that is what is happening, because I think if the Cleveland Guardians, I think they're going to take over all these. So
more than likely, yes. Sam Darnold was benched by the Carolina Panthers in his return to MetLife Stadium. PJ Walker took over. Congrats, PJ.
Yeah, well, this is setting this up. So we talked about this offline. The goal is to get Arash back on the Thanksgiving episode. I'm going to put together a little social media thing. Heineke had that terrible dive against Washington where he like sacrificed himself at the 1 yard line, gave up the ball. There was a whole Washington loss by a lot, but that was kind of where it started to unravel. Right at the same time, PJ Walker came in and like his first drive lost like 20 yards off like his first scramble or whatever. So I'm just sitting there on like a Sunday and Arash is like, hey, at Markcast, like your quarterbacks are terrible. Like, I'm like, why is Arash in Atlanta covering the World Series tweeting me like his ears must have been burning because we were talking about this because I haven't tweeted at Arash in forever, but I mean the fire still burns in Arash. So I want the episode to be a very happy American Thanksgiving with Arash because we've already celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving.
Right. And then I was tweeting him like, oh, you're here. He was here covering, for the whole NLCS. He was here and I was like, the fire's still burning for you. Like, come, let's go grab coffee and you can tell me about my twice failed league with the molded jerseys for an hour. Like, let's hang out, Arash.
Well, I'm literally sitting there on a Sunday. I'm like, Arash is just blowing up my phone. And he was like, really? I'm like, Arash, I just talk about this stuff. Like, I'm not, I didn't coach PJ Walker. Like, what do you want me to do?
I'm not his father. What do you?
I'm not a scout. I'm getting through. So we're into the USFL stuff now. I'm getting this hat out of the way, and then we're going to talk. We got our big when they're going to return. So we've seen this online. Oh, this is good. This is the official USFL snapback. Might look familiar to you, Paul, to the XFL Markcast snapbacks. But this is good. I mean, it's good quality. I think people were expecting a lot worse. You got the Velcro, or not the Velcro, you got snapback on there, which is a step above the XFL. But anyway, So I'm glad that we got that. This is like that. This is really like even the first XFL ones were like these printful, this classic, whatever. But anyway, Jake Henry Baldwin, one last note about this. So I was order 1002, which means I was either order 1 or 2 because they started at 1,000. Stefan was 103. Jake Henry bought his tonight. He was order 1010. So that means between like I bought it and Jake, only 9 people have bought the items from the merch store. So we're going to track the USFL shop orders over the next year. So
there you go. Speaking of USFL, they're ready to finalize agreement with Birmingham Junior College.
It's a Birmingham Jefferson community complex or whatever. So we're good to go. So we had Roy Johnson on last week. They were trying to get the money together. So I think it's like all go ahead now. USFL, April 15th, per CEO Tad Snyder. He says many stakeholders are working on this. Because basically they needed to get the communities to pony up like $3 million to, kind of pay, like the USFL is going to use the stadiums for free, but then the players are going to like eat in the community and use the hotels and they're going to have tourism and all of that. So it's really like negotiating all of those sides, but we're good to go now. Like this is all agreed to. They've raised all the money. A couple interesting notes from this. There's a quote from Hunter Williams, and I asked Roy for context on this and he did not have any to give. It says, this is from Hunter Williams. This proposal is far different from previous efforts to create a new viable football league. For the first time, this effort has the support of the NFL, Fox Sports, and NBC. That struck Mark and us interested about that. I asked Roy for context. He didn't have any, right? I mean, maybe Council Hunter misspoke, right? And just, it's football and the NFL, whatever. That is interesting. The other interesting thing is that Birmingham is most likely going to host half the cities for the second year as well. Because again, when Brian Woods announced all this and everyone's like, how the hell is he going to get to 8 cities in 6 months? 8 cities this year or 8 teams in one city. Then maybe they expand out 4. This is all Brian talked all about this, but it kills me. Like he talked about this on the podcast last April. He goes, we're going to do a hub city. We're going to all of this. So it's TSL with different pay. We've talked about this, but it'll be that 3rd year before there's all 8 independent teams.
That seems like a perfect, that's kind of like how the AAF just kind of went balls to the wall. Yeah. This is smarter. And I got to give them credit. I still don't know anything about the trademarks, but I got to give him credit for this at least.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything around that. We have interesting trademark stuff coming up, courtesy of me, but that would be a tease for a couple weeks down the line. We'll see how that works out. The last thing, this is per Seth. He's a listener of the show. The Carolina Panthers have fired an extension of opposition against the Michigan Panthers trademark for the Spring League. So the mark in question is in a Michigan Panthers. So like we already might. It's one of those things like, the trademarks are around and then no one uses them and then you try to use them. Oh, hey, actually we have all that. XFL's running into that. It's a whole mess with all that stuff. But good news, I think USFL, April 15th, I would feel very confident if you are a player listening. I know a lot of them that are curious about that. I think we are doing good.
Cool. Awesome stuff. So again, remember to like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on Facebook, leave us a review. We like those reviews too. And we appreciate everybody's listening. What is Reed doing over there?
I'm just
getting the USFL hat. So we appreciate everybody listening and tuning in every week. And we'll see you here next week.
And share the Cody Fajardo video.
Yes, share that.
Okay, thanks.